I quit working. From now on, you're the one who will pay the mortgage and your wife's car loan. Those were the words my son, Darnell, threw at me across the lunch table. He didn't shout them. He didn't even sound angry. He said them calmly, almost casually, as if he were asking me to pass the salt. For a moment, the room fell completely silent. I slowly placed my fork on the table and looked at him. "All right," I said quietly. "If that's how you want it, that's exactly what we'll do." The look on his face was priceless. Shock spread across it like a crack across glass. For 70 years, I had been a woman who bent for everyone else. A woman who avoided conflict, who sacrificed her comfort, her health, and even her dignity to keep peace inside her family. But that day, something inside me finally broke. And when something breaks after 70 years of pressure, it doesn't break quietly. Before I tell you how that single moment led to the most satisfying revenge I've ever carried out, you need to understand how things reached that point. Because the truth is, the story didn't start that afternoon. It started 3 days earlier. That evening, I came home after working 12 straight hours at my sewing machine. My fingers felt like they were on fire. At 70 years old, I was still sewing wedding gowns and prom. Dresses just to keep the bills paid in this house. A house where 3 adults lived. Myself, my unemployed son, and his wife, who spent money faster than water runs through a faucet. That night, I had been finishing a coral-colored prom dress. The girl who ordered it was paying me $400. $400 that I desperately needed. The electricity bill was overdue. The mortgage was 2 months behind. And the loan my son had taken out to buy his wife. A new car had already missed. 2 payments. Every stitch I made that day hurt, but I kept working because I didn't have a choice. When I pushed open the front door, the smell of expensive perfume greeted me immediately. Chantel. I stepped inside the living room and stopped. There she was, standing in front of the large mirror by the dining table, turning slowly from side to side. She was wearing a bright purple dress, a new one. "I love the way it fits," she said happily without even looking at me. "Hey, Ellie, did you see this? I bought it for my cousin Tanya's wedding this weekend. It was $200, but it was on sale. $200, the same amount I needed to pay the gas bill. The same bill the company had already threatened to shut off." Across the room, my son Darnell was lying on the sofa watching television, just like he had been doing almost every day for the past 2 years, ever since he lost his job, or rather, stopped trying to find one. He barely glanced at me. "Hey, Mom," he muttered lazily. That was it. No question about how my day went. No concern about the long hours I worked. Nothing. I felt the familiar anger rise in my chest. But like always, I swallowed it. Instead of arguing, I quietly carried my sewing bag upstairs. For years, that had been my routine. Work, pay their bills, stay quiet. Pretend everything was fine. Later that night, I sat on my bed counting the money I had earned that week. The bills in my hands were wrinkled and worn. Just like my hands, just like my life. While I was doing the math, I heard voices downstairs. Darnell and Chantel were in the kitchen. At first, I ignored them. But something about their tone made me pause. I quietly stepped into the hallway and moved toward the staircase. Their voices floated up clearly. "I'm sick of your mother working all day," Chantel complained. "It makes me feel like she's holding it over us that we live here." Darnell chuckled. "She's always complaining about her hands hurting lately." "Well, she better deal with it," Chantel replied sharply. "What else is she good for at her age?" My breath caught in my throat. I froze on the stairs. My own son didn't defend me. Instead, he laughed softly. "As long as she keeps sewing, we're fine," he said. "She brings in enough money to keep things running." Chantel sighed dramatically. "Well, she's not getting any younger?" "That's why I'm going to the bank tomorrow," Darnell continued, "to ask about another loan." My stomach twisted. "Another loan? It's easier using my mom's name," he added. "Old people have great credit." Chantel laughed. "Perfect! Then we can finally renovate the kitchen. I'm tired of these ugly cabinets." I felt the blood drain from my face. Another loan. In my name. Without my permission. Suddenly everything started making sense. The bank letters that sometimes arrived and then mysteriously disappeared. The strange charges on statements I barely understood. The debts that kept growing even though I worked harder every year. I walked slowly back to my bedroom. My legs trembled. I sat on the bed where I had once slept beside my husband, the same bed where I had cried when he died 15 years ago. My hands shook as I stared at them. These hands had raised a child. These hands had worked overtime to pay for his school. These hands had cooked his meals, cleaned his clothes, and comforted him every time he failed. And now those same hands were being used like tools. Tools to finance his life. I didn't sleep at all that night. Instead, I stared at the ceiling thinking about the past, about all the sacrifices I had made, and for the first time in decades, I allowed myself to feel angry. At 6 o'clock the next morning, I got out of bed and went downstairs. Habit is a powerful thing. Even after everything I had heard, I still made breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee, just like every morning for the past 30 years. But while I was whisking the eggs, something unexpected happened. An idea formed in my mind. If they wanted me to stop working so badly, fine, I would stop, but the consequences would not be what they expected. Darnell came downstairs around 10 in the morning, still wearing his pajamas, still yawning. I placed a plate of food in front of him. Chantel came down an hour later, complaining that the house felt cold. "Ellie, could you turn up the heat?" she said, rubbing her arms. I sat down at the table across from them. "I have some news," I said calmly. They both looked up. "I went to the doctor yesterday." That part was a lie, and he told me my hands can't handle sewing anymore. I paused. "So I'm going to stop working." Darnell nearly choked on his coffee. Chantel froze mid-bite. "What do you mean you're quitting?" Darnell demanded. "What about the bills? What about the mortgage? What about the car loan?" I shrugged lightly. "I guess you two will have to find jobs." That was when the explosion happened. "Are you insane?" Darnell shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "You expect me to work to support this house? You're our mother. It's your responsibility." Chantel immediately joined him. "Exactly. We didn't ask to be born. You brought us into this world, Ellie. The least you can do is take care of us." I stared at them silently. Two grown adults in their 40s, acting like spoiled teenagers. And suddenly I felt something shift deep inside me. Years of patience, years of silence, years of sacrifice. They were gone. "You mentioned loans," I said calmly. "How many loans did you take out in my name?" Darnell hesitated. "That's not important," Chantel interrupted quickly. "What matters is that you can't abandon us. Family doesn't do that." Family. The word sounded strange, coming from someone who had never cooked a meal in this house, never cleaned a single room, never paid a single bill. I stood up slowly. My knees creaked, but inside I felt stronger than I had in years. "You're right," I said. "In families, everyone contributes." Darnell relaxed slightly. He thought I was backing down again. But then I finished my sentence. "Starting tomorrow, both of you will look for jobs. And you will start paying every bill in this house." The silence that followed was almost painful. They stared at me as if I had just spoken another language. "I don't have work experience," Chantel protested. "Who would hire me?" "The same way millions of women find jobs every day," I replied calmly. "Even women my age." Darnell jumped to his feet. "I will not be spoken to like this. This is my house too." I looked him straight in the eyes. "No," I said firmly. "This house belongs to me. The deed says Eleanor Baines. It doesn't say Darnell. It doesn't say Chantel." For the first time, my son looked afraid. And that was the moment I realized something important. The power in this house had never really belonged to them. They had simply relied on the fact that I was too kind to use it. But that kindness was officially over. After that breakfast confrontation, the house felt different. For years, it had been a place where I worked quietly while everyone else lived comfortably. A place where I swallowed my anger and pretended everything was normal. But now the silence inside those walls felt heavy. Darnell and Chantel stormed upstairs like a pair of angry teenagers. Doors slammed. Their voices echoed through the hallway as they argued with each other. I remained alone in the kitchen. The dirty dishes from breakfast still covered the table. Normally, I would have cleaned everything immediately. That had always been my routine. But this time I didn't move. I left the dishes exactly where they were. For the first time in years, I refused to clean up the mess they had made. Instead, I walked slowly to the window and looked out at the backyard. The garden was still blooming. My husband had planted those flowers decades ago. Every spring they returned, no matter what happened in the house. Life continued moving forward. Even when people disappointed you. Even when family betrayed you. As I stood there, the phone suddenly rang. The sound startled me. I picked it up after the third ring. "Miss Baines?" a formal male voice asked. "Yes, speaking. This is Martin Hale from Midtown Credit Union. I'm calling regarding several loans under your name that are currently overdue." My heart skipped a beat. Loans. Plural. "I see," I said carefully. "Could you tell me how many loans you're referring to?" There was a brief pause as he checked his records. 5 loans, ma'am. 5. The word echoed in my ears like a gunshot. "And the total amount owed?" I asked quietly. "With interest and late penalties included, The current balance is $8,500. I had to grab the edge of the table to steady myself. $8,500. That was nearly 3 years of my entire Social Security income. My own son had buried me in debt. "Ma'am?" the banker said. "Are you still there?" "Yes," I whispered. "What happens if I cannot make the payments?" Another pause. "If the balance remains unpaid, we would have to proceed with legal recovery actions." "What kind of actions?" "Asset seizure, beginning with your primary residence." "My house." The words felt like ice in my chest. I thanked him and slowly hung up the phone. My hands were trembling. For 30 years, that house had been my safe place. The place where I raised my son. The place where my husband and I dreamed about growing old together. And now it could be taken away because of debts I never even agreed to. I needed answers. I stood up slowly and walked toward the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. When I reached the hallway upstairs, I was about to knock on Darnell's bedroom door. But then I heard voices inside. Their voices. And something in their tone made me stop. I stood very still outside the door. "Don't worry," Darnell was saying confidently. "If the bank forecloses on the house, everything will go exactly the way we planned." My heart began pounding. "Planned? What about your mom?" Chantel asked. Her voice sounded nervous. "What if she refuses to leave?" Darnell laughed, a cold laugh. "She won't have a choice." The words froze the blood in my veins. "If the bank takes the house, she'll have nowhere to go," he continued. "She'll have to move into assisted living." Chantel sounded impressed. "And then?" "Then we buy the house at the foreclosure auction," he said proudly. "At half the original price." I felt the hallway spin around me. My own son was planning for me to lose my house. Not just planning it, counting on it. "And what if she tries to fight it?" Chantel asked. "She's 70, Darnell replied casually. "She doesn't have the money or the energy." Then he added something that made my heart stop. "Besides, I already talked to my cousin Tanya." Chantel gasped softly. "The one who works with Adult Protective Services?" "Exactly," Darnell said. "If Mom refuses to cooperate, we can have her evaluated." My stomach twisted. "Evaluated? For what?" Chantel asked. "For mental incapacity. I nearly lost my balance. My son wanted to have me declared incompetent. Me, the woman who had managed this household alone for decades. The woman who worked 12 hours a day, even at 70 years old. If they say she can't take care of herself?" Darnell continued, "They can force her into a nursing home." Chantel clapped her hands excitedly. "That's brilliant." "And what about the loans?" she asked. A moment of silence followed. Then Darnell answered, "The loans are in her name." "Not ours." I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. "When she has no house and no assets," he continued coldly, "the bank will have to write off the debt. And we walk away clean." My chest felt like it had been crushed. My own son, the child I had raised, the boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, the teenager I had comforted when life seemed unfair. He was planning my financial ruin, and he didn't feel the slightest bit guilty. I quietly stepped away from the door. Every step toward the stairs felt like walking through water. When I reached the kitchen again, I collapsed into the chair by the table. For several minutes, I simply sat there staring at nothing. My mind replayed everything I had heard. The loans, the foreclosure, the nursing home, the plan to steal my house. At that moment, something inside me changed. Not just anger, something deeper, a realization. If I didn't act quickly, they would destroy my life completely. I reached for the phone again. There was only one person I could think of. Walter Dixon, my neighbor. Walter was 72 years old and had been a corporate lawyer before retiring. He had always been kind to me, especially after my husband died. But I had never wanted to bother him with my family problems. Until now. I dialed his number. He answered after 2 rings. "Ellie?" he said with surprise. "I was just thinking about you yesterday." "Walter," I said softly. My voice cracked. "I need help." There was immediate concern in his tone. "What's wrong?" "Are you all right?" "I think I'm in serious trouble." There was a brief pause. "Do you want me to come over?" "Yes," I whispered. "I can't explain everything over the phone. It's about my son." Walter had known Darnell since he was a boy. He had watched him grow up. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, he said firmly. True to his word, the doorbell rang exactly 10 minutes later. Walter stood on the porch wearing his usual brown jacket. His eyes widened when he saw my face. "Good heavens, Eleanor," he said gently. "You look exhausted." I stepped aside to let him in. He sat at the kitchen table while I poured him coffee. My hand still trembled slightly. "Tell me what's happening," he said calmly. And I did. I told him about the loans, about the phone call from the bank, About the conversation I had overheard upstairs. About the plan to force me into a nursing home and buy my house. Walter listened without interrupting, but I could see anger growing in his eyes. When I finished speaking, he leaned back in his chair. "Eleanor," he said slowly, "what your son did is a serious crime." "Crime?" I whispered. "Yes, using someone's identity to obtain loans without permission is called identity fraud. It's a felony." The word felt strange in my ears. Felony. Criminal? I had never imagined those words could apply to my own child. "But he's my son," I said weakly. Walter looked directly at me. "A son who plans to steal your house and have you declared incompetent is not behaving like family. He's behaving like a parasite." His words were harsh, but for the first time in days, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Someone else saw the truth. "So what do I do?" I asked quietly. Walter smiled slightly. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a lawyer who had just spotted a winning case. "We fight back," he said, "but we do it carefully, and we do it legally." Before I could ask what he meant, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Darnell and Chantel were coming down. Walter leaned closer to me and whispered one final question. "Are you ready to stop being their victim?" I looked toward the staircase. For 70 years, I had been the woman who sacrificed everything. But that woman was gone now. "Yes," I said quietly. "I'm ready." And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid anymore. Walter leaned toward me and whispered quietly, "Are you ready to stop being their victim?" I looked toward the staircase where the footsteps were getting closer. For 70 years, I had been the woman who sacrificed everything for others. I tolerated disrespect, ignored insults, and worked myself to exhaustion just to keep my family together. But that woman no longer existed. "Yes," I said softly. "I'm ready." Walter nodded slowly. "Good," he replied. "Then we're going to handle this the smart way." Before I could ask what he meant, Darnell and Chantel entered the kitchen. They both stopped when they saw Walter sitting at the table. Darnell frowned. "Walter, what are you doing here?" Walter gave a polite smile. "I came to check on Eleanor. She called me earlier." Chantel immediately forced a fake smile. "Oh, that's so sweet of you. Ellie has been a little emotional lately." Emotional. The word made my stomach turn. Walter didn't respond to her comment. Instead, he calmly stirred his coffee and looked directly at Darnell. "Your mother mentioned something interesting during our conversation," he said. Darnell crossed his arms. "What's that supposed to mean?" Walter's voice remained calm. "She told me about the loans." For a split second, Darnell's expression changed. Then he quickly tried to recover. "What loans?" he asked casually. But Walter wasn't fooled. "The 5 loans taken out under Eleanor Baines's name," Walter said. "The ones totaling $8,500. The room went completely silent. Chantel slowly lowered herself into a chair. Darnell's jaw tightened. "That's none of your business," he said coldly. Walter nodded thoughtfully. "You're absolutely right," he replied. "It wouldn't normally be my business." He leaned forward slightly. "But identity fraud is something lawyers tend to find very interesting." Darnell's face turned pale. "No one committed fraud," he snapped. "My mother knew about those loans." Walter calmly looked at me. "Is that true, Eleanor?" For years I had defended my son no matter what he did, but not this time. "No," I said quietly. "I never approved any loans." Chantel immediately jumped in. "That's ridiculous," she said loudly. "You probably just forgot." Walter chuckled softly. "Banks usually require signatures," he said. "And Eleanor tells me she never signed anything." Darnell slammed his hand on the table. "You're twisting things," he shouted. Walter didn't even flinch. "Actually," he replied calmly, "the bank already confirmed something very interesting." Darnell froze. "What are you talking about?" Walter reached into his jacket and pulled out a small folder. "This morning," he continued, "I made a phone call to Midtown Credit Union." Chantel looked nervous. "You had no right to do that," she muttered. Walter ignored her. "They informed me that security cameras recorded the person who applied for those loans." The air in the room felt heavy. "And according to the timestamps," Walter continued slowly, "that person was not Eleanor Baines." Darnell's breathing became louder. Walter placed the folder on the table. "Would you like to know who it was?" Neither Darnell nor Chantel spoke. Walter looked directly at them. "It was you, Darnell." The words landed like a bomb. For several seconds, no one moved. Then Chantel suddenly stood up. "This is insane," she shouted. "You're accusing my husband of a crime." Walter remained perfectly calm. "I'm not accusing anyone," he said. "I'm simply explaining what the bank's evidence shows." Darnell's anger exploded. "You think you can threaten me?" he yelled. Walter slowly stood up. I'm not threatening you. He pointed to the folder. But the police might. The word police changed everything. Chantel grabbed Darnell's arm. Darnell, maybe we should calm down. But Darnell was already too angry. This is all your fault, he shouted at me. You're letting outsiders turn you against your own family. For a moment, I felt a small wave of sadness. This was the boy I once held in my arms, the child I loved more than anything. But that boy had disappeared long ago. You stopped being family the moment you planned to steal my house, I said quietly. His face went pale. You heard that? He whispered. Yes, and I heard your plan about the nursing home too. Chantel slowly stepped backward. This is getting out of control, she murmured. Walter crossed his arms. I agree, he said. That's why Eleanor now has two choices. Darnell looked at him suspiciously. What choices? Walter spoke clearly. Choice number 1. Eleanor reports the identity fraud to the police. Chantel gasped. Which would likely result in criminal charges, Walter continued. Fraud, financial exploitation of a senior citizen, and forgery. Darnell looked shocked. And the second choice? He asked quietly. Walter looked directly at him. You leave? Immediately. Darnell blinked. What? You and your wife pack your belongings and move out of Eleanor's house today. Chantel looked furious. You can't kick us out, she shouted. Walter smiled slightly. Actually, she can. He tapped the table. She owns the house. For several seconds, no one spoke. Finally, Darnell asked the question that revealed everything. If we leave? You won't call the police? Walter looked at me. The decision was mine. I thought about the years of disrespect, the lies, the betrayal, and the plan to destroy my life. But I also remembered the little boy Darnell used to be. The police won't be called, I said slowly. On one condition. Darnell waited. You leave this house today, I said firmly. And you never come back. Chantel started to argue again, but Darnell stopped her. He knew they had lost. Without another word, he grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the stairs. Within an hour, they were packing. 2 hours later, they were gone. No goodbye, no apology, just the sound of their car driving away. Walter stood beside me at the window as we watched them disappear down the street. How do you feel? He asked gently. I expected to feel heartbroken. Instead, I felt something else. Peace. For the first time in years, the house was quiet. No shouting, no manipulation, no people treating me like a bank account. Just silence. And freedom. Walter smiled. You did the right thing, he said. I nodded slowly. Maybe I had. Or maybe I had simply waited 70 years to finally stand up for myself. Either way, my life was finally my own again. And for the first time in a very long time, I was looking forward to tomorrow.